these are for me sketches. These are they're not final artworks. They're just kind of ways for me to generate material for other work. I've been an artist in Miami since I'd say around 2004. I became an artist not on purpose. I was basically living in New York, practicing architecture, which is what I studied. I had no intention of being an artist, but I happened to be in New York during 9/11. And experiencing that was quite traumatic for me, so much so that I actually left New York and I came back to Miami. My family was here, I'd lived here before, and in kind of dealing with the ramifications of what happened that day, which all of us did, of course, I began to start doing these drawings, and with no real intention of where they would go. And little by little, I actually created a body of work. And from then on, I just kept going. So basically, I started doing freehand drawings, but very specific, very technical looking, ink on mylar, which is this old school way of drafting, which I knew when I was in school before computers came on. And I felt like I wanted to go back to that kind of just holding a pen sort of feeling. And the work really started out as things I was doing in school. I was analyzing Jackson Pollock paintings just to see if there was any kind of rationale behind his work. So there were these series of kind of overlays, which you can do with mylar, which is like a transparent or translucent type of paper. And basically I ended up just kind of applying that to my own work. I started doing my own paintings as a kind of means to do these drawings. So it's interesting in that the painting actually became the sort of sketch, if you would, for a drawing, not the opposite, which is more traditional. But yes, as far as size went, I started really doing 24 by 36 inch standard sheet size for really many years. And then after a while, I just went bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think the limit as far as what was manufactured was, I would say about 8 feet long I could handle by about maybe 4 feet tall. So it got really out of control after a while. But it was a very interesting process, and it just took me down a very interesting path. The models are somewhat abstract. They're not really meant to, say, be a literal model of, say, a building per se. They obviously have dual meanings, or even more than two meanings, but I would say that they became a way for me to start to enter space more actively than the drawings would. So I think that for me, again, I sort of jumped off or out of the drawing process into space. So there's always this strange kind of tension between my analog works in terms of they are real, they're in the real world, but they look like they could be digital. It's a very common, actually, reading is when you see my work online. Most people think they are digitally produced drawings. I mean, I do digital work now, but back then it was all hand-drawn. And you know, the more I lived here, the more I realized that we do have this issue, of course, of hurricanes, but also climate change and sea level rise. And I think that kind of precarity, that kind of real fragility that I think everyone understands here, just innately if you live here, is something that makes this place, I think, really different. I don't know if I'd call it interesting, but it's something that really resonates with me, not just as an artist, but just as a person who lives here. I actually heard from Jen Anasio, who's the curator for this exhibition, Monica Mesa, who's the project manager, and I ended up meeting more and more people from the PAMM that are part of this incredible team. And you know, Knight Foundation, I heard, provided a grant, and through the partnership with PAMM, I came to realize there was an AR project. So at the time, I think they were just kind of exploring on maybe how to manifest this project. So in just speaking with Jen and Monica one day, just kind of saying, well, you know, these are the things I'm interested in, I guess it resonated with them. I think that a few things, you know, one was, of course, the issue of kind of drawing I think just the idea that drawings can exist both as analog, they can migrate, between analog and digital. I think that was a conversation that we had that for me has always been interesting, because I've never said, oh, I'm an analog artist or I'm a digital artist. I've actually migrated in between both domains. So I think that was interesting. And then there was another layer which had to do with what we spoke about, which is this issue of just the environment in which we live. There was definitely an interest in democratizing, the project, and so in sort of thinking that through, actually placing a majority of the pieces outside of the PAMM, kind of engaging very actively with the architecture, which is amazing. I think that all of these kind of layers seem to line up, and I think provided an interesting opportunity to explore some of these issues. So all of these invasive species kind of grew out of this process. If I thought, well, what species might end up migrating or becoming attracted to those locations, that started to resonate. And then actually going back into my analog work, which was a layer in this project that was really interesting, which was that all of the pieces actually use my analog work as source material for new work. And some cases you can really tell, but that was interesting, and kind of going back and looking at my analog work and saying, what are some of the works here that might actually lend themselves to the architecture? So of course I'm looking at these drawings that fit on a desk, and then how they may end up being, just scaled within the real sort of one-to-one, and not just in 2 dimensions, but now in 3 dimensions, and not just in 3 dimensions, but actually in real time. So it's an incredible process that it's not linear at all, but those hypotheses, I think, are really key to the process. The public has many things they can take away. I mean, first of all, it's interesting in terms of when this project was launched, because we actually were looking to actually hear what the public had to say, and I thought that was really interesting, that we wanted feedback. But in terms of what I think would be interesting are not just the kind of potentials of AR as technology, but I think the potential of AR as a medium, as an art medium. I think that's important to maintain, and that's why, for me, the fact that the PAMM did this as an exhibition, basically like any other exhibition, I think is incredible and important. It's like photography when photography was invented, or video when video was invented. It's a medium, and it has characteristics, and this being one of the first, it will eventually be archived as an historical piece in a sense. So it'll be really interesting to see how the technology evolves and how the public actually is able to embrace it or understand that as a medium. In terms of the content, I think it's important that the public begins to think about what's going on, and I think that they are, and they do. And I think in a way it's sometimes more interesting to do it in a creative way rather than just to say this or that about the environment. I think that the show doesn't judge, it just kind of suggests what the future might be like. Also, I think as far as just the public's access to the exhibition, I think that's also going back to this idea of democratization of technology. I think that the fact that everybody can engage this for the most part without even going in the museum, I think is really important, and I'm hoping that the public does kind of like that and appreciates it and engages with it.